Couple of Edelbrock Victor intake manifolds here. One being for a Oldsmobile, one for a Pontiac. And I would compare the two for the person out there in the world, the two people in the world that might be interested in such shit. Here's a direct comparison. These are both Victor intakes. This one here fits your Oldsmobile 400, 425, and 455. Your tall deck Oldsmobile engines, big blocks. That's a big ass intake. Expensive fucking intake too. Then you got your Pontiac, which this would be suited for a 400, 428, 455. And you could bolt it on a 350 Pontiac, but it had to be a bad son of a bitch to be able to utilize it. But it would be best on a bigger cube Pontiac engine. You don't see many Pontiacs and Oldsmobiles built these days. One thing, they're kind of rare, and then the shit's expensive. You got a lot less selection of parts than what you can find. You're gonna pay out the ass for it. Oldsmobile more expensive than Pontiac. It's the engine. This intake here, the 455, it's going on. The cam for it, I'm gonna use a Herbert roller cam, and fucking cam for it's like $580. And I'm also going to use a Herbert roller cam in this big Pontiac I'm building, and it's like $480. So it's $100 cheaper than the cam for the Oldsmobile. Then you can get solid roller for a small block Chevy, about $300, $310 from Herbert. Small block Chevy, once again, hard to beat. But I like these oddball engines. I started out, first engine I built was a Pontiac. Had a 67 Firebird. I got when I was a kid. I built my first engine, I was 12. I had a 53 Chevy. I was going to put a Pontiac engine in it. But I ended up finding that Firebird to fuck with. Much easier. But I was into the Pontiacs pretty heavy back decades ago. But then all of a sudden they become collector's items, and all the old good shit got real expensive overnight. Like heads and shit for a Pontiac. You pay you spend a couple of grand on a pair of cast iron late 60s Pontiac heads that are rebuildable. The better ones, and you can find some undesirable shit for $400 or $500 for a pair. But if you're looking for any round poured heads especially, you're going to pay several $1,000s for a pair of them. But even your good D-port, like number 16s and 670s and shit, They cost you $1,500, $2,000 for a pair that you probably need to go through. And all the good muscle car era shit's all suddenly collector's item. So, but you can buy fucking parts. There's places making shit for Pontiacs. You can build a whole Pontiac engine and never even have one. Buy a new Pontiac aftermarket block. Buy aftermarket heads, intake, every fucking part you need for one. Just build a complete aftermarket Pontiac engine. But you're gonna spend some serious coin. Expensive shit. The same way with Oldsmobile. They make blocks for them too, but they're super fucking expensive. Everything you buy for an Oldsmobile, you're gonna pay top fucking dollar for it. But the shit has potential. That's the thing. Most people, since the shit does cost so much, they go mild, like basically stock with a few upgrades. So people don't really get to see the true potential of this shit. But when you start putting big roller cams in them and jacking that compression up 12, 13 to 1, fucking get the heads flowing, put a good intake and good induction on it, some nice fucking headers and shit. Of course you're gonna need rods and pistons, and the stock cranks will actually take more than people think they will, but they make aftermarket cranks for them they're not real expensive. They can get that way, but you can buy cast steel Eagle cranks and shit, like $600-700 for an Oldsmobile, about $400 or $500 for a Pontiac. And the things, they'll hold 700-800 horse, no problem. Throw some H-beam rods and forged pistons and shit in there. It can start adding up quick, especially in the valve train. That's where you buy rocker arms for Oldsmobile. Like I said, a Harlan Sharps, you're looking at $550, $600. So, fucking intake like that, they're going for like $700 to $800. About $800 now. I think them big Pontiacs like that are $600 to $700. Back in the day, a lot of people thought Oldsmobiles and Pontiacs were basically the same thing, because most people never even laid eyes on them. So they just assumed they were pretty much the same thing. Same with the Buicks. But they were also a totally different engine. The fucking Oldsmobile, they're wide as hell. Big, massive fucking engine. They fill up an engine compartment. Pontiac engines are pretty good size. There's the old debate. Pontiac didn't make big blocks or small blocks, but they did make big mains and small mains. Your big main engines were your 421s, 428s, 455s. Your small mains went up to your 400. And then they did make a a 301 and what the fuck was that? A 267. They were like an inch short. The block was like an inch shorter than a regular Pontiac engine. So a person could call them the small block, but physically though, Pontiac on the outside, you couldn't tell a 400 from a 455. They looked identical. Oldsmobiles, the 400, 425, and 455s were all big bastards, and the small blocks, you could tell they had narrower intake and shorter block, so you could visibly tell the difference. The old Pontiacs and Oldsmobiles and Buicks, you can make some power with them. You spend the money. I used to build a lot of Oldsmobile engines too. I got on a Oldsmobile kick for a while. Built quite a few of them actually. Built a NHRA stock, G stock automatic 455, a 71 Cutlass. It ran like 1160s. It was a legal stocker. It had a few tricks in it, and that fucking cam was, it had 475 lift, but it had a shitload of duration at 50, and it had like a 108 lobe separation, and everything was minimized and maximized, so it had quite a bit more compression than it came with. Shit like that. Get every horsepower you can, every way you can, but you still got to stay within the rules. I built several stockers just for the challenge of it. Plus I was paid to do it, but still it was pretty interesting to see what you could do within a given set of rules. It takes more thought than just throwing a bunch of fucking parts together. Get a rule book and study it and figure out how to get the most with the least. Them old 455s and shit made good stockers. Oldsmobiles and Pontiacs, and Buicks, they all made good stockers. I had a 71 Buick Grand Sport Stage 1 455 back in the day. It was a runner. It was a drag car, cage in it and shit, and Lexan windows, and I hate to say it, but a Chevy swapped into it. The Buick engine was blown up years ago, so had a big block Chevy swapped into it. Then a radical small block, and then it got took apart and sat for years, and then got sold as a roller. Fucking Lexan windows were all fogged up and shit, and it needed every piece of fucking glass. It needed a whole nother car for a parts car to put it back to making it usable. I wanted to put it back, make it a street machine, but it was too far gone. It had no wiring in it, just bare. It was just a fucking shell. Old drag car, that's how it was when I got it. It probably been a race car all its fucking life. But I sold it to a buddy of mine, and it's sitting in his backyard now. He ain't done shit with it. Been sitting for years. And I had quite a few old Firebirds and Trans Ams, and had a GTO. I always wanted a 69, 68 GTO, but I never could find one in my price range. I like getting shit cheap and take a turd and polish it up. But I did find a 70 with a blown up engine that I got a pretty good deal on, and I ended up fixing it and flipping it and made a pretty good chunk of change off of that one. It was a Judge. Some dude and his wife going through a divorce, and this old lady jumped in it and blew it up on purpose. So practically gave it away. The fucking body was mint. Got a 455 in it, which it just had a spun bearing and was knocking. I ended up turning the crank like 20,000. I put some new rods and pistons and shit in it, put it back together, put a bigger cam in it, a torquer intake, and an 850 double pumper, hooker headers, and sold it for like 20 grand. Had a couple old Grand Prix, had a 78 Grand Prix, had a 71 400 out of a GTO, a turbo 400, 8.5 rear. That thing ran pretty good. Had an 85 Grand Prix, put a 455 in. That thing ran real good. I got a 63 Catalina Super Duty 421 sitting on a trailer out here. That's what I'm going to build this Pontiac engine for. The 421 got blown up, which I think the clutch exploded and fucked the back of the block up and blew the engine up. That was like 1970. So the original engine is long fucking gone. But I've got a few Pontiac engines. Build a house for it. I ain't worried about numbers correct and shit. I'd be lucky to even find any of that old Super Duty shit now. So I'm just gonna build a badass Pontiac racing engine, but do it mostly old school. That intake's kind of modern, but they've been making these since the late 90s or so. But they used to make an old Warrior intake. They started making it in like 1970, and it looked kind of like that, so it won't be totally out of place. You probably use a, I don't know, 1050 Holley Dominator. Be what ends up on it. It's 400. It's a 67 400 block I'm using, but it's gonna be about 474 cubes or 469, depending on which crank I buy and how much I board and shit. But it's gonna be a stroker 400. It's gonna look pretty much old school. I'm gonna use gold Moroso valve covers on it and paint the engine light Pontiac blue. It'd look pretty cool. The old BOPs. They're too expensive to fuck with anymore, but I'm just lucky I've got a stash of the shit that I've had since back when you could still get the shit reasonable, which I didn't get this fucking thing reasonable, but the engines and shit. I have about 7 455 Oldsmobiles stashed away, a couple of 425s, a 403, a 330, a 350. Then I got a couple of 455 Pontiacs and a few 400s and a 389. I got 61 389. I was gonna build it up and stroke it out for the Catalina, but it's earlier model shit's different. The 400s and 455 era is the way to go with the Pontiac. The 67 to 73 era is where you want to be. They're totally different. Oldsmobile definitely got a bigger fucking intake. The Pontiac's got a separate valley tray, so you can pull the intake and still got a valley tray covering up the cam and lifters and shit. The Oldsmobile, it's attached to the intake, so you pull the intake off of it, there it all is. These things, they make good engines. They're torquey as hell, and they can make a lot of horsepower too. It's just a few areas of concern you gotta take care of. And you want to put some good rods and shit in them. Got a lot of stroke. You need some strong fucking rods. And run pretty good size solid roller cams. A lot of compression. Which there'll be just play toys. Ain't gonna be nothing I drive around in every day. See how fast I can make them. Project. Get back to my roots. The old Pontiacs and Oldsmobiles. Kind of miss fucking with them, really. I've had this Cutlass out here 35 years. It's had 7 or 8 engines go through it. They were all Oldsmobile engines. But I've had a shitload of Cutlasses from 68 to 87. Had damn near every year they ever made at one time or another. I went through a few Tornados and shit I bought for the engines. 98s and 88s, and scrap them or sell them to a buddy of mine that was a demolition derby head. Sell the big 98s and shit to him. But I'd keep the 455s and shit out of them. There they are, Edelbrock Victors, BOPs.